In a sport defined by speed, where a tenth of a second can separate immortality from irrelevance, only a handful have risen above the rest. Titans of talent, masters of the machine, warriors of will. These are not just drivers, they are legends. But what makes a driver a greatest of all time? Is it the titles, the speed, the bravery? Or is it the moments that made time stand still? This is the story of Formula One's greatest drivers. Not just how they raced, but how they became legends. Before telemetry, before carbon fibre, before runoff areas and team radios, there was one man who ruled them all. Manuel Fangio, the godfather of Formula One. He didn't start racing until his 30s. By the time others were retiring, Fangio was just getting started. The Argentine wasn't just fast, he was fearless. In a career that spanned only 51 races, Fangio won 24 of them. 5 world championships. For nearly half a century, that record stood untouched. He drove for Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Ferrari and Mercedes, and won with all of them. But Fangio's greatness wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the way he drove. Smooth, intelligent, calculating. He didn't wrestle the car, he read it like poetry. In the 1957 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, Fangio lost nearly a minute during a pit stop, and still came back to win. Lap after lap, he hunted down the Ferraris of Hawthorn and Collins with supernatural precision. Fangio's driving that day wasn't human, it was divine. He retired at 46, leaving behind a legacy that even Senna and Schumacher bowed to. He was not the first Formula One champion, but he was the first to make it look eternal. Some drivers fight the car, some master it, but Jim Clark, he became the car. In an era where danger loomed around every corner, Jim Clark drove like the world didn't exist beyond the cockpit. Born in the Scottish Borders in 1936, he was a farmer by upbringing and a racer by destiny. With a quiet demeanour and a modest smile, Clark was the antithesis of flamboyance. But once the visor went down, he transformed into something else entirely, a force of nature. In 1963, behind the wheel of Colin Chapman's revolutionary Lotus 25, Jim Clark redefined what dominance looked like. Out of 10 races that season, he won 7. Not just wins, but utter demolitions of the field. Pole positions, fastest laps, flag-to-flag victories. Clark didn't just beat the competition, he obliterated it with surgical precision. Jim had this sixth sense, Stewart would later say. He could feel what the car needed before it even asked. Clark made it all look easy. But it wasn't. The cars were monsters. No seatbelts, no crash protection, no telemetry. Just raw power and human instinct. He wasn't a warrior like Senna or a tactician like Prost. He was effortless. The kind of driver who never looked like he was trying, yet always ended up ahead. But legends aren't always allowed long reigns. On April 7th, 1968, during a low-stakes Formula 2 race at Hockenheim, Clark's Lotus veered off track and struck a tree. There were no witnesses, no heroic save, just silence. He was 32. When Jim died, Jackie Stewart recalled, a little piece of all of us died too. The racing world was shattered. The greatest natural talent had ever seen. Gone. No warning. No farewell. Just gone. Jim Clark won 2 world championships, but stats don't do justice to his legacy. He was the driver every other driver wanted to be. Fangio called him the greatest. Stewart idolised him. Senna studied him. And today, even Max Verstappen's dominance carries echoes of Clark's calm, clinical annihilation of the grid. Jim Clark didn't need theatrics, he didn't need drama. He just drove. And in doing so, he etched his name into the fabric of Formula One. Forever. There are drivers who win races, and there are those who change the meaning of courage itself. Niki Lauda didn't just survive Formula One, he defied it. Born into Austrian privilege, Andreas Nicolas Lauda chose not the easy path of business or banking, but the impossible one, racing. He didn't have natural charisma, he wasn't from racing royalty, he bought his way into the sport, taking out loans to fund his early career. But once he got the chance, he never looked back. In 1974, he joined Ferrari, a team in crisis. Enzo Ferrari was searching for a saviour, and he found it in the unlikeliest of heroes. A cold, calculating driver with a brilliant engineering mind. Lauda rebuilt the Scuderia. He didn't just race the car, he designed it, he optimised it, he perfected it. By 1975, he was world champion. But Lauda's story wasn't written in titles, it was written in fire. 1976, Nürburgring, the old Nordschleife, the green hell. Lauda begged to cancel the race. He knew it was too dangerous, no one listened. On lap 2, his Ferrari struck the barriers. The car erupted into flames. Lauda was trapped inside. For nearly a minute, he burned alive in front of the world. Most thought he was dead. His lungs were scorched, his scalp charred, his eyelids melted. But Niki Lauda didn't die. Just 42 days later, he returned to race at Monza. His wounds were still open. His helmet rubbed raw skin. He finished 4th. It wasn't a victory, but it was the most courageous drive in F1 history. The 1976 season ended in rain and chaos. Lauda withdrew from the final race in Japan, famously saying, "My life is worth more than a title." James Hunt won the championship, but Lauda won the world's respect. He came back to win 2 more world titles, once with Ferrari, again with McLaren. He retired, came back again, and helped rebuild Mercedes decades later, playing a key role in bringing a young Lewis Hamilton to the team. Niki Lauda didn't fit the mould of a traditional hero. He wasn't poetic like Clark or mystical like Senna. He was blunt, honest, fearless. But in that brutal honesty, he became the most human legend of them all. To rise from the ashes is rare. To race while still burning, that is the legacy of Niki Lauda. In the theatre of Formula One, where fire and fury often steal the show, one man chose calculation over chaos, precision over passion. He wasn't flamboyant, he wasn't loud, he was the professor. Alain Prost was born in France in 1955. He didn't grow up idolising drivers or daydreaming about Monaco. No, he was analytical, even as a boy. A thinker, a tactician. By the time he reached Formula One in 1980, Prost already knew that racing wasn't just about speed, it was about strategy. He joined Renault, the national team, and immediately caught attention. Not for wild overtakes or brash interviews, but for consistency. He didn't waste laps, he didn't waste energy. Every move was a calculation. Every race was a chessboard. In 1984, Prost moved to McLaren. There, his greatest rival awaited. AYRTON Senna, the storm to Prost's still water. Their rivalry would define a generation. But before that, Prost had work to do. He narrowly lost the 1984 title to Niki Lauda by half a point, the smallest margin in F1 history. He didn't complain. He came back. And in 1985, he became France's first world champion. Then he did it again. And again. But greatness doesn't come without opposition. And in 1988, McLaren signed Senna. What followed was the most iconic rivalry in Formula One history. Senna was instinct. Prost was intellect. Senna believed in God. Prost believed in data. Senna drove with emotion. Prost with calculation. They collided, literally. In Suzuka twice, once in 1989, when Prost turned in. Once in 1990, when Senna didn't lift. Their feud was Shakespearean, philosophical, legendary. He had his beliefs, I had mine, but we pushed each other to limits no one else could. In 1993, Prost returned for one last campaign with Williams. He won his 4th and final world title, before stepping away for good. He retired with 51 Grand Prix wins, a record at the time, but statistics can't capture who Prost really was. He wasn't the crowd favourite, he wasn't the boldest, but he was always there, studying, waiting, striking. In a sport ruled by chaos, Alain Prost was the mind among madness. And in the end, even his greatest rival respected him. The professor didn't just race, he redefined the science of victory. He was more than a driver, he was a force of nature, a warrior on wheels, a man who raced not just with skill, but with soul. His name was AYRTON Senna, and he became not only the legend of Formula One, but also the immortal. Ayrton Senna da Silva was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil in 1960. From his earliest days in karting, it was clear this boy wasn't ordinary. He didn't just drive, he became the car. There was a grace to him, a spiritual connection between man and machine. While others chased speed, Senna chased perfection. He believed his talent was a gift from God. And when the lights went out, it was as if something divine took the wheel. In the rain, Senna was untouchable. It was in those chaotic, slippery conditions that his true power emerged. He didn't fear the elements, he embraced them. In Monaco in 1988, he delivered a qualifying lap so fast, so otherworldly, it was nearly 1.5 seconds ahead of his teammate, Alain Prost. Even Senna himself said he couldn't explain it. I was no longer driving consciously, I was driving by instinct. I was in a different dimension. To Brazil, Senna was more than a champion. He was hope. In a country marred by poverty and political unrest, Senna gave people something to believe in. When he won his home Grand Prix in 1991, in agonising pain with a stuck gearbox, he cried like a child on the podium. The anthem played and an entire nation wept with him. And then came the rivalry. Senna versus Prost. Instinct versus intellect. Faith versus logic. They collided on and off the track. But in that fiery clash, they created magic. Senna won 3 world championships. He redefined what it meant to fight, to feel, to fly, but fate had other plans. May 1st, the San Marino Grand Prix. Senna led the race in a Williams that he didn't trust. The weekend had already claimed one life, Roland Ratzenberger. Senna, deeply affected, placed an Austrian flag in his cockpit to raise at the finish in tribute. That moment never came. On lap 7, at over 300 kilometers per hour, his car left the track at Tamburello. The world held its breath. Ayrton Senna was gone. It wasn't just the loss of a driver, it was the loss of spirit, of purity, of what made Formula One feel human. Over 3 million people lined the streets of São Paulo for his funeral. Alain Prost, his greatest rival, carried the coffin. Senna was the only driver I ever feared, Prost once said, and the only one I truly respected. Senna raced with heart, fought with faith, and died chasing perfection. The day he died, Formula One lost its soul. But his spirit, that lives on. In every wet race, in every brave overtake, in every fan who still believes that racing is poetry in motion. After the soul was lost, Formula One needed order, control, a new kind of greatness. And from the heart of Germany came a man who didn't just race to win, he raced to dominate. He was precision. He was willpower. He was a machine. His name was Michael Schumacher. Born in 1969 in Hürth, a small town near Cologne, Schumacher was the son of a bricklayer. He didn't come from wealth. His father worked at the local karting track, and that's where young Michael began to shape his destiny, lap after lap. While others dreamed of F1, Schumacher calculated his way there. He was a student of the sport, an engineer in a racer's body. Every corner was dissected, every braking point memorized. He turned preparation into an art form. And when he arrived in Formula One, it was like a storm had broken loose. In 1991, he got one race with Jordan at Spa. One chance. One lap in qualifying was enough to send shockwaves. Benetton signed him immediately. In just his second full season, Schumacher was world champion. And in 1995, he did it again, this time with utter control. But that was just the beginning. In 1996, Schumacher did the unthinkable. He left Benetton for Ferrari, a team in chaos. They hadn't won a title in nearly 2 decades. The car was unreliable. It was a risk, a gamble. But that's what made Michael different. He didn't just want to win races, he wanted to build something, from scratch, to the summit. He brought his trusted lieutenants, Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, Jean Todt. Together they forged a dynasty. At the Spanish Grand Prix in 1996, in torrential rain, Schumacher drove what many consider the greatest wet weather race of all time. The Ferrari was undrivable. The conditions were brutal, and yet he obliterated the field. That wasn't driving, said Martin Brundle. That was magic. By 2000, the machine was complete. The dominance began. 5 consecutive world championships, from 2000 to 2004. He rewrote the record books, most wins, most fastest laps, most podiums, most consecutive titles. But he wasn't universally loved. Schumacher's career was not without scars. In 1994, he collided with Damon Hill in a title-deciding crash. In 1997, he tried to take out Jacques Villeneuve and was disqualified from the championship entirely. He was ruthless, uncompromising. Some called it passion, others pure aggression. But that's who Schumacher was, a gladiator. And in 2006, he walked away on his own terms. 7 titles, 91 wins, the undisputed king, until the hunger returned. At 41, Schumacher came back, not to chase more records, but to push limits, his own. He didn't win in his return, but he didn't need to. His legacy was sealed. Then tragedy struck. In 2013, Michael suffered a traumatic brain injury while skiing. The man who had mastered control was now in a silent fight, far away from the roar of engines. And since then, we've heard almost nothing. No interviews, no updates, just whispers. Respectfully, the world waits because we remember. He was the man who made Ferrari bleed red again, the driver who bent F1 to his will, the machine that raced like no other. What if greatness isn't born from legacy or luck? What if it rises against all odds? This is the story of the knight who defied the kingdom. Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton was born in 1985 in Stevenage, England. A kid from a humble home in a sport dominated by power, money, and history. He didn't fit the mould, but his father made sure he broke it. Anthony Hamilton worked multiple jobs to keep Lewis on the track. Sometimes sleeping in the car, sometimes building the kart by hand. The odds? Slim to none. But Lewis didn't care about odds. He just needed one shot. At 10 years old, Hamilton walked up to McLaren boss Ron Dennis and said, "I want to race for you one day." Ron wrote back, "Call me in 9 years." It didn't take that long. By 2007, Lewis wasn't just in Formula One, he was setting it on fire. In his debut season with McLaren, he nearly won the world title. There was no rookie mistakes, rather a hell lots of politics got in the way. But the message was clear. This kid's not here to compete, he's here to conquer. In 2008, with rain falling in Brazil and the world watching, Hamilton delivered. In the final corner of the final lap of the final race, he passed Timo Glock.
Is that Glock going slowly?
It is, it's Glock! Oh my goodness me! Hamilton's back in position again! 1,100,000 local hearts!
History was made, but greatness isn't just about winning, it's about enduring. In 2013, he left McLaren for a struggling Mercedes team. Critics called it a mistake. They didn't know what was coming. From 2014 on, Hamilton ruled the sport. 7 world championships, over 100 race wins, over 100 pole positions, records shattered, legends surpassed. He didn't just drive, he led. Then came 2021, the battle with Max Verstappen, a season of giants, a final race of controversy. On the last laps of Abu Dhabi, the world watched Formula One take victory away. Not just a defeat, an injustice.
No, Mikey, no, Mikey, that was so not right.
Hamilton didn't rage. He walked away, silent, dignified. Days later, he became Sir Lewis Hamilton. Because sometimes the crown doesn't lie in a trophy, it lies in character. Lewis Hamilton is not just Formula One's most successful driver. He's one of its greatest pioneers, the knight who challenged the kingdom and changed the sport forever. Not all warriors wear scars. Some carry questions. Some race not to conquer, but to understand. This is the story of Formula One's philosopher. Sebastian Vettel was born in 1987 in the quiet shadows of Germany's racing legends. He wasn't born into fame, he built it. With speed, precision, and a mind that never stopped asking, why? By age 8, he was already winning in karts. By 11, he was the kid everyone in Germany was watching. And at just 19, he was on the Formula One radar. His debut came not in a front-running car, but behind the scenes, testing for BMW Sauber. And when his moment came in 2007, he didn't just arrive. He announced himself. Then came Monza, a rainy Saturday, a midfield car, a teenager on the grid. And then, a miracle. Vettel put a Toro Rosso and underdog team with no history of success on pole. On Sunday, he led from start to finish. Sebastian Vettel became the youngest race winner in F1 history, the kid who stunned the world. That was the spark, but Red Bull gave him the fire. From 2010 to 2013, Vettel didn't just win, he ruled. 4 straight world titles. He danced in the wet, flew through corners, redefined what a perfect lap looked like. When the car was right, he was untouchable. But Vettel wasn't chasing headlines, he was chasing perfection. Then came 2014. Regulation changes. Red Bull dominance faded. Ricciardo outscored him. The era ended. But Vettel wasn't finished. In 2015, he joined Ferrari, not for glory but for purpose. He wanted to do what his hero, Michael Schumacher, had done. Bring Ferrari back to life. For 2 years, Vettel went to war with Mercedes, and for 2 years, he almost had it. But almost isn't enough in Formula One. A spin in Hockenheim, a crash in Monza, a championship slipping away. You either wear the crown, or you carry the weight. By 2020, Ferrari was fracturing. Politics replaced passion. Vettel was no longer the favourite. He joined Aston Martin not for victory, but for peace. By now, Vettel had evolved. He became a voice. For climate, for justice, for dignity, for the bees. He even cleaned the grandstands after races. In 2022, he left Formula One. Not because he had nothing left, but because he had already given so much. Some legends are sculpted over decades. Others explode into existence, fierce, raw, unstoppable. Max Verstappen didn't wait for an invitation. He tore the doors off Formula One and claimed a seat at the table. Born in 1997 to racing blood, his father, ex-F1 driver Jos Verstappen. His mother, karting champion Sophie Kumpen. Max was forged in competition. Karting weekends were war zones, winter mornings, frozen fingers on the steering wheel, a relentless dad barking split times. Childhood. Number it. It was preparation. By 17, he'd never driven a road car. But he had an F1 contract. Critics said too young, too reckless. Max replied on track. Late braking passes, audacious lunges. He was wild, yes, but he never looked unsure. 4 races into 2016, Red Bull promoted him. First race, Barcelona. The 2 Mercedes collide. Suddenly an 18-year-old leads a Grand Prix with Kimi Räikkönen in his mirrors. 44 laps, 0 mistakes. He becomes F1's youngest ever race winner. A star? Definitely. But raw speed is nothing without polish. 2017 to 2020, spins, clashes, learning. Each error filed away, processed, eliminated. Red Bull finally gives him a title-worthy car. Hamilton stands between Max and destiny. Silverstone 51G impact into cops. Monza, car on top of Hamilton's halo. Saudi Arabia, brake test accusations, penalties, fury. Equal points into Abu Dhabi. Chaos, safety car, 1 lap to decide it all. Fresh tyres, fearless heart. Verstappen pounces at turn 5. World champion. Was it controversial? Yes, but unforgettable as well. The debate over luck evaporates in 2022 to 2024, 2022. 15 wins, single season record. 2023, 10 wins in a row, another record. 2024. Title clinched with races to spare. He bends entire Sundays to his will, managing tyres with surge and calm, setting lap times to the 1,000th on command. Rain, heat, sprint, street, doesn't matter. Red Bull gives him a title-worthy car, and Max delivered. Before turning 28, he owns 4 world championships, 60-plus Grand Prix victories, a litany of youngest and most consecutive records. Yet his story is unfinished. Page is still wet with fresh ink and burnt rubber. Max Verstappen isn't the future of Formula One, he's its uncompromising presence. From Fangio's mastery to Verstappen's ferocity, 7 decades flash by at 300 kilometers an hour. Chassis change, engines evolve, safety improves. Yet one truth endures. Greatness is timeless. It's Fangio coaxing fragile machinery to glory. Clark floating through rain like poetry. Lauda climbing from fire. Prost winning with a calculator's calm. Senna chasing a divine perfect lap. Schumacher forging an empire in red. Hamilton turning records into responsibility. Verstappen rewriting the present with ruthless speed. Heroes fade, engines fall silent, but their stories echo in every future lap. Because Formula One is more than racing, it's the pursuit of the impossible. Again and again,